May 8, 1945. The war in Europe is over. Nazi Germany has fallen. Berlin lies in ruins. Adolf Hitler is dead. The world celebrates victory. But something strange is happening in the shadows. In the port cities of Genoa and Barcelona, priests are issuing travel documents to men with suspicious accents. In Buenos Aires, a customs officer stamps a passport without asking questions. In Damascus, a German businessman opens a new engineering firm. Over the next decade, an estimated 9,000 Nazi war criminals will simply disappear. They won't be captured. They won't face justice. They'll vanish into thin air, only to resurface years later, living comfortable lives under new identities in South America, the Middle East, and even North America. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented history. Today, we're uncovering one of the most elaborate escape operations ever orchestrated, a network that involved the Vatican, intelligence agencies, and former Nazis themselves, a pipeline that moved mass murderers across continents while the world was still counting the bodies. This is the story of the Ratlines, the secret Nazi escape network that changed history forever. The collapse of the Third Reich. Let's set the scene. It's early 1945, and every Nazi leader knows the game is up. The Soviets are pushing from the east, the Americans and British from the west. Germany is being crushed between two unstoppable forces. The concentration camps are being liberated, revealing horrors beyond imagination. The evidence of genocide is overwhelming. For high-ranking Nazi officers, SS commanders, and Gestapo agents, one thing becomes crystal clear. If they're captured, they'll hang. The Nuremberg trials are already being planned. Lists of war criminals are being compiled. The Allies want justice, and they want it public. But here's what most people don't know. The planning for escape didn't start in 1945. It started much earlier. Operation Bernhard and financial preparation. Throughout the war, the Nazis weren't just fighting, they were preparing for defeat. They laundered billions in stolen assets, gold taken from Jewish victims, art looted from museums, currency from occupied countries. Swiss bank accounts were opened. Properties were purchased in neutral countries under false names. One operation, called Operation Bernhard, produced perfect counterfeit British pounds, not just for wartime sabotage, but to create untraceable funds for the future. By 1944, networks were already forming. Former intelligence officers were making contact with sympathetic elements in neutral countries. Routes were being scouted, safe houses established.
The Odessa myth and the reality. You might have heard of ODESSA, the Organization of Former SS Members. It appears in movies and novels as a shadowy global network. Here's the truth. Odessa, as a formal organization, probably didn't exist. But that doesn't mean there wasn't organization. The reality was actually more decentralized and in many ways more effective. Multiple networks operated independently. Some were organized by former SS officers, others by Nazi sympathizers in neutral countries. Some involved Catholic clergy, others involved intelligence agencies. They didn't need one central organization. They needed willing participants, and they found them everywhere.
What were the Ratlines? The term Ratline originally came from nautical terminology. It refers to the rope ladders sailors used to climb a ship's rigging, but in the post-war context, it took on a sinister new meaning. A ratline was an escape route, a series of safe houses, forged documents, and sympathetic contacts that could move a wanted Nazi from Europe to freedom. The most famous ratlines ran through Italy, specifically through Rome and Genoa.
But there were others, through Spain, through Austria, through the Middle East. These weren't crude smuggling operations. They were sophisticated, well-funded, and shockingly organized. The Vatican connection. This is where the story gets controversial and complicated. After the war, thousands of refugees flooded into Italy, displaced persons, concentration camp survivors, soldiers trying to get home. The chaos was immense. The Catholic Church, through various organizations, was helping refugees legitimately. The Pontifical Commission of Assistance was providing aid and travel documents to displaced persons. But some elements within the Church were helping the wrong people. Bishop Alois Hudal was an Austrian-born bishop in Rome who was openly sympathetic to fascism. He believed that Nazis were preferable to communists and that some of them should be saved from Soviet revenge. Father Krunoslav Draganović was a Croatian priest who ran Ratlines specifically for Croatian Ustaše war criminals who had collaborated with the Nazis. These men and others like them used their positions to obtain travel documents from the International Red Cross. These documents, intended for legitimate refugees, were issued to Nazis with false identities. Here's how it worked. A Nazi would arrive at a monastery or church safe house. He'd be given a new identity. Baptismal records would be created. A Red Cross travel document would be applied for under this false name. No questions asked. The International Red Cross, overwhelmed with legitimate refugees and operating on trust, would issue the document. With that, a war criminal could board a ship to Argentina, Syria, or anywhere else that would take them.
The Italian route. Rome became the central hub. Nazis would make their way to Italy through Austria or directly through the Alps. They'd hide in monasteries. Santa Maria dell'Anima, a German church in Rome, was one safe house. Convents in Genoa were others. From Rome, they'd travel to port cities. Genoa was the main departure point. Naples and Bari were alternatives. Ships departed regularly for South America. Many were operated by companies sympathetic to fascism. Some captains knew exactly who their passengers were. Others didn't ask. The journey to Argentina took weeks, time enough for a war criminal to rehearse his new identity and prepare for his new life. The Spanish route. Spain under Francisco Franco was another key transit point. Franco had been supported by Hitler during the Spanish Civil War. He remained sympathetic to former Nazis as long as they weren't too politically active. Nazis would cross the Pyrenees from France into Spain. From there, they'd travel to Madrid or Barcelona. Spanish authorities often looked the other way, sometimes with explicit instructions from Franco's government. From Spanish ports, they could sail to South America or the Middle East. The Middle East connection. Not all Nazis went to South America. Some went to Syria and Egypt. Why? Several reasons. Some had professional skills these countries wanted. German engineers helped develop Syrian infrastructure. Former Wehrmacht officers trained Arab armies. Egypt in particular welcomed former Nazis. Under President Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt hired numerous Germans, including former SS officers, to help build up military and intelligence capabilities. Alois Brunner, one of Adolf Eichmann's top deputies, responsible for deporting thousands to death camps, lived openly in Damascus until his death in the 2000s. Syria refused all extradition requests.
Argentina, the primary haven. If there was one destination that defined the Nazi escape, it was Argentina. Under President Juan Perón, Argentina became the most welcoming destination for former Nazis. Why? Perón had his own authoritarian ambitions. He admired fascist organizational methods. He also saw an opportunity. These Germans had technical skills. They had money. They could help industrialize Argentina. But there was something else. Argentina had a massive German immigrant community dating back to the 19th century. German was widely spoken. German schools, churches, and businesses were everywhere. A Nazi could disappear into this community and live comfortably. The numbers are staggering. Conservative estimates suggest 5,000 Nazis escaped to Argentina. Some historians say the number could be twice that. They settled in Buenos Aires, in beach towns along the coast, and in remote areas of Patagonia. They opened businesses, they had families. Many lived under their real names. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust.
Eichmann was the chief architect of the Holocaust. He organized the logistics of genocide, the trains, the schedules, the deportations. Millions of deaths were his direct responsibility. After the war, Eichmann was captured by the Americans, but escaped from a prison camp. He hid in Germany for years, working under a false name. In 1950, he made his move. Using the Italian Ratline, with help from a Franciscan friar who obtained documents for him, Eichmann traveled to Argentina. He lived there for 10 years. He worked at a Mercedes-Benz factory. He had a house in the suburbs of Buenos Aires. His children went to local schools. He wasn't hiding in a bunker. He was living a middle-class life. In 1960, Mossad agents tracked him down, captured him, and smuggled him out of Argentina. His trial in Jerusalem became a watershed moment. For the first time, the world heard detailed testimony about the Holocaust from survivors. Eichmann was hanged in 1962. It remains the only execution ever carried out by the State of Israel. Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death. Then there's Joseph Mengele, the sadistic doctor who conducted horrific experiments on prisoners at Auschwitz. Mengele escaped to South America in 1949, also via the Italian Ratline. He lived first in Argentina, then Paraguay, then Brazil. Unlike Eichmann, Mengele was never captured. He lived on the run for decades, moving between safe houses, always one step ahead of Nazi hunters. He drowned in Brazil in 1979. His remains weren't identified until 1985. Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. Klaus Barbie was the Gestapo chief in Lyon, France. He was known for his brutal torture methods. He personally ordered the deaths of thousands, including French resistance fighters and Jewish children. After the war, something shocking happened. American intelligence recruited him. Why? He had intelligence on communists. In the early Cold War, that was valuable. The Americans used him as an informant, then helped him escape to Bolivia in 1951. Barbie lived in Bolivia for decades. He became a businessman. He advised the Bolivian military dictatorship. He was involved in coups and drug trafficking. He wasn't arrested until 1983 and finally extradited to France in 1983, where he was convicted and died in prison. Franz Stangl, Commandant of Treblinka. Franz Stangl was the Commandant of Treblinka, where at least 900,000 people were murdered. He escaped via the Ratlines to Syria first, then Brazil. He lived openly in São Paulo, working at a Volkswagen factory. He was arrested in 1967 and extradited to West Germany. Convicted of mass murder, he died in prison in 1971.
Simon Wiesenthal, the conscience of the Holocaust. Not everyone was willing to let these criminals escape justice. Simon Wiesenthal was a Holocaust survivor who dedicated his life to tracking down Nazi war criminals. He called himself a gatherer of information rather than a hunter, but his work led to hundreds of prosecutions. Wiesenthal survived 5 concentration camps. After liberation, he began documenting Nazi crimes and tracking perpetrators. He provided crucial information that led to Eichmann's discovery. He tracked down dozens of others. He worked with governments, intelligence agencies, and journalists. His philosophy was simple: justice delayed should not be justice denied. Even if these men were old, even if decades had passed, they needed to face their crimes. The Mossad operations. Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, conducted several operations to capture or kill former Nazis. The Eichmann operation in 1960 was the most famous, but there were others, some successful, some not. These operations were controversial. They involved violating the sovereignty of other nations. They raised questions about kidnapping versus extradition. But for many Holocaust survivors and their descendants, they represented a form of justice that no international court could provide.
The Nazi Hunters Network. Beyond official agencies, there were private individuals and organizations dedicated to finding Nazis. Beate and Serge Klarsfeld tracked down Klaus Barbie and others. Tuvia Friedman ran a documentation center. Groups like the Wiesenthal Center continued the work for decades. These weren't revenge missions. They were about documentation, truth, and ensuring the historical record was complete. The trials continue. What's remarkable is that Nazi trials continue to this day. In 2015, Oskar Groening, the accountant of Auschwitz, was convicted in Germany at age 95. In 2018, a 95-year-old former guard was charged. The argument for these prosecutions is simple. There is no statute of limitations on murder. The passage of time doesn't erase the crime. Critics argue these elderly defendants are too old to serve meaningful sentences. Supporters argue it's about the principle, about saying clearly you cannot commit genocide and live peacefully ever after.
The failure of denazification. To understand how so many Nazis escaped, we need to understand how denazification failed. After the war, the Allies intended to remove all Nazi influence from German society. Every Nazi Party member would be investigated. Those guilty of crimes would be prosecuted. Those complicit would be barred from positions of authority. It didn't work out that way. The scale was overwhelming. Millions of Germans had been Nazi Party members. You couldn't remove all of them from society without causing complete collapse. The Cold War changed everything. By 1947, the priority shifted from punishing Germans to rebuilding West Germany as a bulwark against Soviet expansion. Former Nazis were quietly rehabilitated. Scientists were recruited through Operation Paperclip. Intelligence officers were recruited for their knowledge of the Soviets. This wasn't secret. This was policy, explicitly decided at high levels. The rationalization was that their crimes were in the past and their utility was in the present. But that rationalization required ignoring mountains of corpses. The Vatican's role remains controversial and debated. Pope Pius XII has been accused of being too silent during the Holocaust and too helpful afterward. Defenders argue he was trying to help genuine refugees and that rogue priests, not official policy, helped Nazis. What's undeniable is that Vatican institutions and Catholic clergy were involved in the Ratlines. Whether this was official policy or the actions of sympathetic individuals remains debated by historians.
In 1998, the Vatican issued a document acknowledging that more could have been done to prevent the Holocaust. It stopped short of full accountability for the post-war escapes. Sympathetic networks. Beyond official complicity, there were networks of ideological sympathizers. In South America, fascist movements remained strong. Many people saw Nazis as victims of Allied propaganda rather than perpetrators of genocide. In the Middle East, anti-British and anti-Jewish sentiment made former Nazis welcome. In Europe, anti-communist sentiment trumped anti-Nazi sentiment for many people.
These sympathizers provided safe houses, jobs, and protection. They formed communities where Nazis could live without fear of exposure. The logistics of identity. Creating a new identity required several elements. First, documents, birth certificates, baptism records, identity cards. These could be forged or obtained through corrupt officials. Second, a backstory. The new identity needed to be plausible. Most Nazis claimed to be ethnic Germans displaced from Eastern Europe. This was believable because millions of Germans had been displaced. Third, a destination that wouldn't ask too many questions. Argentina, Syria, and a few other countries fit this description. Fourth, money. Escape wasn't cheap, but many Nazis had looted wealth to finance their new lives. Fifth, contacts. Someone at the destination who could help with initial settlement, employment, and integration. With all 5 elements in place, a Nazi could successfully disappear.
The long shadow. The Nazi escape network left a lasting impact on history. It undermined justice for Holocaust survivors. It allowed perpetrators to live comfortable lives while their victims' trauma went unacknowledged. It created communities of unrepentant Nazis in South America and elsewhere. Some of these communities remained ideologically committed to fascism. It demonstrated that international law was weak, that powerful nations could ignore justice for geopolitical convenience. But it also sparked something important: the modern human rights movement. The development of international justice. The failure to capture all Nazi war criminals led to the development of better international justice mechanisms. The Nuremberg trials established the principle that following orders is not a defense for crimes against humanity. Later, the International Criminal Court was established. War crimes tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda followed. The concept of universal jurisdiction emerged, the idea that some crimes are so heinous that any nation can prosecute them, regardless of where they occurred. None of this would have developed without the shock of seeing Nazi criminals escape justice. The last Nazis. Today, very few Nazi war criminals remain alive. Those who do are in their 90s or older. But the search continues. Governments still investigate. Documents continue to be discovered. New evidence emerges. In 2024, investigations are still active in several countries. The message is clear. It's never too late for justice. Lessons for today. What can we learn from the Nazi escape network? First, that justice delayed often becomes justice denied. The longer it takes to hold perpetrators accountable, the more likely they are to escape. Second, that international cooperation is essential. The Nazis escaped because countries didn't cooperate. They found havens because some nations prioritized ideology over justice. Third, that the law must evolve to address new threats. The Holocaust was unprecedented. The legal framework didn't exist to address it fully. We must constantly update international law to address contemporary atrocities. Fourth, that documentation matters. The work of Holocaust survivors in documenting what happened, of researchers in tracking perpetrators, of witnesses in testifying, all of this creates a historical record that cannot be denied. The responsibility of memory. The Nazi escape network is more than a historical curiosity. It's a reminder of what happens when the world prioritizes expediency over justice. Those who helped Nazis escape often justified it as pragmatic. The Cold War demanded it. These men had skills we needed. The past was the past. But every Nazi who escaped justice was a denial of humanity, a statement that some lives mattered less than others, that genocide could be forgiven for convenience. Today, we face new atrocities, new genocides,
New crimes against humanity. The temptation to look away, to prioritize other concerns, to let perpetrators escape, that temptation remains. The lesson of the Ratlines is simple. Justice cannot wait. Accountability cannot be optional. The fight against impunity must be constant.
The secret Nazi escape network wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a documented historical fact. A network that involved clergy, intelligence agencies, and sympathetic governments. Thousands of Nazi war criminals escaped justice. Many lived comfortable lives. Some were never caught. But their escapes sparked a movement, a commitment to international justice, a determination that the world would never again allow genocide to be unpunished. The hunt for the last Nazis continues, not because we're bloodthirsty, but because justice delayed should never become justice denied. Because we owe it to the victims, to remember, to document, to demand accountability. Always. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like covered next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.